welcome back. Before we go into our question and answer session, I would like to finish this off. And then I think we have a nice template to have a talk about or discussion about if needed. I wanted to add what I've done now. I have the Eastern Front here. I have the Western Front, so that is America inside. So this is basically Elder Terry's story. This has been a story that I have been sharing, and I wanted to add the internal movement line. So what has been happening actually within the movement. So I'll start here. So this is 2021, and this is internal. Internal movement. Radical feminism is, I think, what we have marked for 2021 as the theme, as the subject that has been opened up. It was also in a study in October, a series of studies by Elder Test back then, which was I think in the end of October, where she demonstrated it, and we marked that as the significant studies or the significant opening up of that waymark. We also had the LGBTQ presentation series, which was done, I think, in August of the same year. I think you could add that to this one as well. But that's actually part of the previous waymark. It was actually the Exeter. But I'll add it to because I think they're directly connected. I'll add them here. So then the increase of knowledge of that new dispensation, I think, was from February to June was the Vespers series. The Vesper series of Elder Tess started in February. I actually think it started in January, but the recorded one started in February, and the last one was done in June. I think it was also June 24, the same day as Roe v. Wade was overturned. And the main theme, I guess there are several. You could summarize it, I guess, in a different way, but I would suggest it is about how to sift the left. Sifting the left. I think that was the how do you say that? On how to sift the left was the question that in this Vespers was answered or was tried to answer. And in answering that question, Elder Tess went into the left. But to understand the left, we need to first understand what is actually the right, because that's where we came from. And then we went into the right and all the specific parts of the right, not only the Christian right, but also far right. And then we went into the left and we went into far left to understand all those differences. We went into libertarianism. But I think this was the core question: how to sift the left. How do you know what sources do you read and what sources can you trust from the left? We don't read the right, but not everything from the left is good either. So we needed to understand the differences within the left, and to do that we needed to understand the right also. So that was the increase of knowledge. Then we come to April to May 2024. These are the two the two times that Elder Terry does her studies on July. So the prediction, the time prediction. Time prediction of Elder Terry. And then brings us to I'm suggesting this one is July to the ICM. This is where the fulfillment of July was explained, further explained. So this is, I think, in my words, we can phrase it differently. I'm open to correction on perhaps dates or how to the title of the how to phrase the different waymarks. This is how I at the moment see those waymarks, this dispensation, to understand the Boston, the Concord, the Exeter, not only on the Eastern Front, but also on the Western Front and internal within the movement. And I think we can also add, but I haven't, maybe for a future study, do the internal for the King of the South. I know 2021 is the year where Navalny, after being poisoned 3 times, returns back to his homeland and is arrested. He will receive a sentence, first sentence, and a second sentence, and then will be killed. That's more or less, I think, in that way I could even add it here, but I guess because of lack of space, I won't. So another thing that we can also start marking here. We have National Sunday Law here, and we expect somewhere in this dispensation to have an increase of knowledge. So just for the sake of finishing this line, I'll draw that one as well. And I think this is open for discussion, but I am, well, I believe we're in the increase of knowledge. And I think that is, although it maybe is not publicly taught by speakers, or I haven't heard Elder Terry speak about it or Elder Perminder, but I think everybody is more or less recognizing that what we are going through at the moment as a movement, for example, here, this line, this whole Sunday law studies, that series that I think started in January as well. I think it was January 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, is where Elder Perminder sent out a letter to the ministries and said, like, we're going to start this this session, so to speak. We're going to start this, and it was January 22nd. So I'll mark here the 22nd of January. This is the beginning of a new progress in the movement. We're going to further develop the Sunday law understanding. So that's what I'm further develop Sunday law understanding. That started in January, and I think this, if I'm not mistaken, technically this is going to end somewhere in June. I think the last presentation somewhere is in June. So I'll write down June with a question mark, but these are my thoughts for the internal movement. That what we're going through at the moment is already the increase of knowledge for the new dispensation, the Sunday law dispensation. So if that is so, then we should expect also to see an increase of knowledge on those other lines, or at least on the same waymark. So for example, I would say January is also the beginning of Trump's presidency. January 20, he's inaugurated, and then the day after he is going to present a whole bunch of executive orders, is going to shake the whole nation and the world. And you can see the agitation, the worldwide agitation. Now we can see it, where it was still a little invisible here. We can start at the increase of knowledge. We can start and we can see it now. So that is worldwide agitation, but also internal, of course. Within the United States, a lot of things is happening with the immigration, the transgender in military, the DEI policies are all cancelled, things like that, and many other things. Of course, Elon Musk with his Doge, many government officials have been, what's the word for civil agents? Is that a word? Have been fired. Complete ministry, the Ministry of Education is completely closed. Things like that. So it's really shocking what we have seen in this time period. But it's only the increase of knowledge. It's just the beginning of a further development. And externally, I would mark February 18. February 18, diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations between the USA and Russia are restored. So this was done in, I think in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. First America and Russia came together, sit together, and they officially restored diplomatic relations. So that means, technically, I'm not 100% sure what it means, but I think it has to do with the embassy having people of the recognizing each other, having the usual channels of communication restored again, things like that. So because they were, especially since the invasion, were frozen, I think. I don't know how to word that exactly, but those diplomatic relations were restored. That was the first thing that needed to be done, even in order to be able to have peace talks and negotiations. First needed to recognize each other's diplomatic. You needed to recognize each other and restore the diplomatic relations. So that was done in February 18. And well, they have been in a process of negotiations, peace talks. I think it was at the end of April, where we have a mineral deal between America and Ukraine. But there is no deal, or there is no, actually America said, we're going to step out of this whole negotiations thing. That was, I think, the 2nd of May, this month. So things are happening here. I have some thoughts about perhaps book ending this already, but that is perhaps a little too early. I don't know. But I believe really that we are here, and I think we can bookend those ones as well already or soon to come, somewhere this year. So I have put Eastern Front, Western Front, and internal movement all together. I can imagine there's many questions or several questions, or I have been not clear about things, or so please, if you have any comments or thoughts or questions, shout out. I don't know how you do that usually. Are you working with hands, or are you just shouting out?
That's up to you and what you're comfortable with. Do you want people to raise their hands or just shout out?
Perhaps good to raise hands, because then I can have an order of. Nobody.
Everyone, I was going to say Natalie had a question in the chat. Can you see the chat?
Now I can.
She put, if Trump was in charge, wouldn't the war be over by now? Deal be done? Question mark.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. So if Trump was in charge, wouldn't the war be over by now? Deal be done? Well, I guess Trump is not completely in charge, and I think that's the agitation. So the external in the world, the Eastern Front. We are now seeing the worldwide Sunday law agitation. So no, Trump is not completely in control, perhaps, but that is developing. And I think we come to a point where we say, like, worldwide Sunday law. That is a point where the United States is going to be in control. We're not there yet, but we can see the steps being taken to get there. Yeah. I mean, everything that we've seen now in this time period with those tariffs, for example, Donald Trump is forcing the whole world to do what he wants, or what the MAGA Trump movement wants, to follow their idea, the ideology. And he is now using the tariffs even to just force the rest of the world just to do what he wants. If you don't listen to me, you get a 50% tariff. Or he is even sending letters now to companies outside of the United States. So I've heard here in the Netherlands, and I assume that's happening everywhere, that as a business, as an organization, you receive a letter from the United States and says, if you want to do business with us in the United States, if you want to do business with us, you have to give up all your DEI policies. And you have this document here, and you have to sign this document where you promise to stop all your DEI policies. And only then, if you've signed that document, you are able to do business with the United States. So I think he's doing that everywhere, and that's only a small beginning. What we can see, we have a beginning taste of what it's going to look like. And yeah, maybe he's not completely in control yet, and that's true, and that's why we are in this dispensation that needs to be solved. He is, the world was divided in you have USA, and under the USA you have all those other nations. UK, Netherlands, the rest of Europe, all those nations that are allies with the USA. And then you have, let's say, Russia. And China is one of them. And North Korea and Venezuela. And you have, well, I think yesterday in Moscow, or this week in Moscow, they had their party, and they all sat there next to Putin. So Russia has some influence still. But I think I'm sorry?
Arjan, it's Natalie. My question was just regarding the peace deal with the king itself, not with regards to, the bringing down Egypt or the world, even though that is included when we know Russia will come to its end as well at the Universal Sunday Law. But my question in the chat was just regards to the Ukraine war.
I know, yes, I know, and I'm giving a little bit.
I agree with you. I agree what your answer was earlier on was.
Okay.
Because you agreed that Trump, Putin is still saying he wants this and that, and that's why Trump's pulled back and said, I'm pulling out of this peace deal because he can't get his own way.
Yeah, exactly. and I'm repeating my answer in a different drawing. I guess I'm repeat and enlarge a little bit, is to say that this is still the situation, but I guess this list is getting longer as Putin is going to do his tariff war, where he's going to say, if you want to be a healthy country still, you need to do, and every nation is some way dealing with the United States. He's going to force with either tariffs or with military aggression. So this list is going, as we go to the end of the world, that's how I see it. This list is going to be longer, and this one is going to be shorter. That's my simplistic picture of how I see as we move forward to the worldwide Sunday law. So yes, he's not fully in control. Was there more in the chat? All right, another question. Anybody else? Gonna be a short Q&A then. I see a hand. I'm sorry, Curtis. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I get you already intimated that you're open to discussing different bookends of dates and stuff. So I don't want to get into that specifically. What I do want to ask is from your perspective, right? If we look at the first waymark that we have, 2021, and then 2022, Concord, Boston and Concord on those lines. I'll say Elder Tess. Elder Tess gave structures, the history of Pyrrhus, in when Rome defeated, I can't even remember the cities now, in the south of Rome, and etc.
Tarentum and Thurii.
Yeah, that whole history. And then she brought 273 as a waymark and indicated that this goes somewhere and etc. So that gave us like an anchor to try and make application of what there is, taking the principles from those stories. So you or another speaker could try and make application of those principles. Going forward, what do you think the anchors are in the rest of your in the rest of your line? So post June 2022, going forward, like for you or another speaker or anyone studying, like how can we be certain that those fulfillments of events are the ones? What's stopping myself or someone else from coming and saying, actually, there was this event that happened with Trump and Orban, not on March 8, but on another day, and might have been Trump and someone else, something else that happened that fills those that I could put there. Is there anything that you have in mind to anchor those events to in a line upon line type of way? I guess my question is to avoid, this will sound crude, subjectivity around, okay, this looks interesting, let's make that a waymark. What do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, good point. So talking about the Eastern Front, I had my original line, and I think I had it. I had good arguments for the Exeter that I placed there. So I said July to November. I placed it here, and I said that is a mini version. Everything I see here in July to November is what I'm going to expect in 2025 with the crowning. You see a crowning of, so there was this, I had characteristics of Exeter, where I said like, this is a general characteristic of Exeter is that you can actually see what is going to happen. You see it actually already happening, but in a smaller way. And you know what is going to happen at the bigger waymark that follows. So that was my general characteristic of Exeter that I used. I am forced because of myself, because I have now agreed with July 18 as being Sunday law, then I need to force my line of the Eastern Front in that model. And that has been, and that is, I think, still a work in progress. And this has been my current situation. So July to November, I've put this one basically here with the same story, the same story that I had here. I moved to here, to the Sunday law. And this one is for myself, the weakest. It is, I needed to find a new Exeter because I moved my Exeter to National Sunday Law, and I needed to figure out a new Exeter. I knew already when I presented it back then that there was a Trump-Orban thing happening in March, but for the sake of that study, I ignored it because I thought it was more the July to November where they actually started doing something. So I've made it to Exeter, but to be honest, that's you brought that as an example. This is my weakest in my mind.
Just for clarity, I just picked that one randomly.
I know, but so in general, in my mind, these two are. I won't touch them. These I had to change, and I'm open to thoughts. And this one is the weakest for me. So that's on my Eastern Front line. On the other lines, I don't think that's the one. That's not the lines that I created. I guess these are not mine. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I guess it's spurred a secondary question to that, which is when we look at all these lines, so if we think of prophecy as containing three major stories, the Eastern Front, Western Front, and the Third Wall. There may be others, but let's just take those three, for instance. And we go from 1989, and we'll just stop at the Sunday law. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, I don't know, maybe 20 waymarks between then and then. Is there an expectation that each of those waymarks has all of those stories? So 1991, we should be able to see the King of the South story. We should be able to see the internal USA story. We should be able to see Third World story. 1996 the same, 2001 the same, and so on and so forth. In your mind, is that an expectation? Or there can be a waymark that's specifically dedicated to one story and you don't see anything else of those other stories? Or is that just not possible?
Good question. I think in my mind they must be there all, but I definitely recognize that we haven't done that in the past so much. No, I think there can be gaps. That's so. This whole model of a Boston Concord Exeter, or having an increase of knowledge and a formalization, way in the past, that was Elder Jeff teaching that you had a time of the end, increase of knowledge, formalization. But that was only the first dispensation. The fact that we have an increase of knowledge and a formalization in all the dispensations between the big waymarks is something that Elder Tess introduced in 2019. It's relatively new. So I don't think we have. So I've always been thinking, although I can't see from all the lines, all the waymarks in the beginning, especially the first dispensation, so 1989 to 9/11 and 9/11 to 2014, because we weren't studying that way back in the day. That is something we have developed since perhaps 2019, and Elder Tess has introduced that. So, studying it, yeah, okay, you said Islam, so King of the North, King of the South, internal. Yeah, I think most of the time it lines up, but I agree. I guess there's gaps where we just can't find or see events taking place. So maybe this is just a gap. For example, I mean, I put something here to make it fit. But maybe that is disturbing the whole story, and I should just leave it. It's like, okay, I just don't have an Exeter, which I thought about, because in that original line of Elder Tess, when she goes to 273, you have a 2021, you have a Sunday law, and you have this one. These were the ones that she was pointing out. So maybe there is no Exeter even here. Has been a thought of mine.
Just on that 2731, I'll stop after this. So it's not just me talking, but just on that 2731, because it's you pointed that out, and I guess we see that with other lines, that when you do a story, at least from my perspective, you go to the story of, I don't know, Babylon and Israel. It's not necessarily that you're going to see every single waymark in that. There's a specific segment of your line that's pointing to. The ship of Adramyttium is a good example. It doesn't need to stretch all the way back to 1798 because it's focusing on a specific element. So when Tess pulls out 273, it's not that there's no waymark after that. It's just that history is pointing out one specific thing. And so bringing up 273, I have a question of how you made application of 273. In that original story, Egypt is going to send ambassadors to Rome. And if I remember correctly, you made that the world or the UN, you can correct me, someone sending ambassadors to the USA. In application, Egypt wasn't doing that to take care of the king of the south, to take care of Pyrrhus. Egypt had their own agenda to rule the world. So how or why, like, what's your reasoning for then making your application related to the king of the south when the original story wasn't about the king of the south? I know they do that because they see what Rome has done with the king of the south, but to take care of someone like their target, Egypt's target was Seleucus, if I remember correctly. It wasn't the king of the south. Does my question make sense? Or do I need to rephrase it?
Because I'm not sure if because I'm not including the King of the South in the story, other than that it was because of what happened here with the King of the South.
So if you could remind me, in Eastern Front, February to September 2022, what application are you making there of the Waymark 273? Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. So you see Russia in this in this. Of course, it is. Yeah, okay, I get your point. It has to do with actions from Russia here. So Russia is doing something. But I think, okay, I think I get your point. No, I've only emphasized the element that Egypt sends ambassadors to Rome because of what happened at the previous Waymark in Beneventum. And I guess they do it, like you said, because they are in a fight with Seleucus. That's actually the real king of the north in that story, perhaps. But so there is that's their enemy. So you have Egypt is in a fight with Seleucus, and they want to have diplomatic relation with Rome because that could perhaps benefit them one day. So I have ignored that. I've looked at the event itself, what happened there, and the reason why it happened, and ignored the Seleucus part or the Seleucus part. So I only said Egypt did that here in 273 because of what happened here in 2021. And if there was no connection with Pyrrhus here in this or with the king of the south here at that Waymark. In reality, yes, there's action. There's Russia is doing something that brings the world, whatever, in concord, and they realize what has happened in this time period, or I should do it here. What has happened here? So yes, there is gaps in that, and I'm not sure if that is a problem. I don't think we have always all the characteristics lining up or all the parts of the story.
I think Primrose had her hand up as well. Rose?
Hi.
Hi.
Mine is not really a question. I wanted to just say when we began with Elder Jeff, like there was arrival, formalization, increase of knowledge, formalization, but Elder Tess came and brought structure, in every dispensation. And I wanted to just say that I think having that structure in each dispensation kind of like solidifies the message. So Curtis had said, should they always be something, I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly to what Curtis was asking, but I'm thinking if it's a structure, it should not be something optional to say, okay, in this dispensation, because we don't know what to put there, so we're just going to forget about this structure. I think it will actually help us to say, let's go and further study to find out how we can best make what answers we're going to get, to have that perfect structure. So and I know that there are lines where, like you explained, that they just target a certain dispensation. But then if it's a line like you've been putting there, like it's the whole line. So I'm thinking that pattern or structure should remain there, in as much as we might not have anything to fill that gap with, but a structure should not be used when we have information and disregarded when we don't, because a structure gives us, it's part of methodology. It gives us something sustainable, and that will guide us in our studies. So it wasn't really a question. I don't know whether I answered Curtis or It's just a comment. Yeah.
Thank you, Curtis.
I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't negating the fact that we should have those structures. I think that, if I remember correctly, that one of the reasons why Tess extended that Boston, Concord, Exeter is because she recognized that you see the same thing between the close of probation and the second advent, that you have a Boston, Concord, Exeter with the death decree and time element. And so she recognized that upon the testimony of two, a thing is established that actually all these dispensations have the same repeating pattern. So I'm not questioning that repeating pattern and that structure. My question was specifically related to all the prophetic stories that we have, and it's not just those three. It's not just King of the South versus King of the North. It's not just the third woe, and it's not just King of the North internal. It's a whole load of other topics that we have that we can say are prophetic topics. My question was, at each and every waymark, is it a necessity to see every single prophetic story at a waymark? So that was my question, Rose. It wasn't should the structures exist. I think the structures are there. They've been tested, proven. It was out of the, let's just say, 10 prophetic stories, will there be some waymarks where we only have 3, some waymarks where we only have 1? Is it a necessity to see all 10? That was my question, just for clarity.
Thank you. I get it. Thank you.
Emma?
Yeah, slightly different question. I think it's really nice to see that 3 lines there clearly laid out with the black, red and the blue. I think that makes it really much easier to sort of remember and compute and line it up. I think it's good, very helpful. And when you prayed at the beginning, you said something about when we study these lines, help us to see, the characteristics of God's kingdom. And I'm just wondering, when you look at those 3, if you have thought about any parallels about how Russia's doing it, how America's doing it, what we're learning in the movement, and anything we need to see from that.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe it's another study. Go on.
Sorry?
Maybe it's another study. Go on.
Yeah, that's a study in itself. But it's then you go into the, I guess, the morals of those kingdoms. What are they based upon? How are they operating? What is the organization structure? Who is in control? How do they treat each other? I think that is, to me, what I meant, at least when I said that. And then we have the opposing, or the other version of God's kingdom. So I don't have like concrete ideas about, I don't have a line of comparing and contrasting or something. But I think what we all see happening in the world right now, with the seventh kingdom being clearly visible now in America, and the world stage is going to be visible. At least we get a demonstration of how it not should work, and I think it is to us to understand and compare and contrast in some way, to know how it should operate, or how would God operate. No, I don't have like concrete ideas about that at the moment, or at least not prepared. But I think that's actually one of the things that, because knowing all those dates is one thing, that's not important. It's not going to save us. In the end, we should see the story behind the rises of those kingdoms, and why are they the seventh kingdom? What is behind them? And at the same time, we as a movement are rising as well. The rise of God's kingdom on earth as well. And what is then so different about us, and why? Because this is going to develop into a loud cry. There's going to be a cry. This message, as I said, I think we're in the increase of knowledge, and we are discussing amongst ourselves the different studies that are around. You can see that they are coming closer together. I think this is going to swell into a loud cry at some point. That as a movement we can see and understand. We can recognize Babylon and see why it is Babylon and what is wrong with Babylon, and we can offer them something different. And I think that's where we are. We are now still finding out. We're in a process of understanding that, and I'm as much a student in that as anybody else, I guess. So no, I don't have any concrete additional examples or thoughts on that, but as I said.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think that's what I guess we're learning. When you look at Trump's line, it seems to be this rise in visibility of Trump and who he is and what he is. I suppose in the movement we're learning about God, how God operates, who God is, drawing closer to God. People are getting more of a revelation, like you say, of Babylon. We're getting more of a revelation of God's kingdom and what that looks like. Even I think Elder Bimmin is one of the recent ones about this whole order of love and what it looks like and how we operate in, our spheres of influence, our own sphere of influence, like the way these kingdoms, operate in their sphere of influence. Just on the back of that, a separate question, I suppose, are you expecting with the blue line at the bottom, I guess the USA, no, it's not blue line, sorry, just the illustration at the bottom of the board where you put USA has all these spheres of influence and Russia has less. So with the death of Russia, are you expecting the death to look like they've still got these spheres of influence perhaps, but most of the world are following Trump out of force? Or do we think the whole world will have to capitulate? Say Russia will have to pay tariffs, for instance. Do you have any ideas about what that would look like, this final kind of death of Egypt? I guess the worldwide Sunday law, what that's going to actually look like. No.
No, yeah, I mean, yes, I have thoughts about it, but at the same time I realize it's probably going to look different than we all expect. But
Yeah.
my thoughts is like this is that everybody is going to be in
Trump's pocket.
here. But how that is going to look like, because at the end of the world we're also going to have a fight, and there's going to be the world is going to be in turmoil. So I think there comes a point where everybody is here. That's how I see it. But then everybody realize, and then there is nations realizing that they have been duped, and then they're going to eat her flesh. And then I guess there's going to be turmoil. So I don't know. Yeah, that has been but that's, I think, standard Adventist thinking. So it might all be different. I've no idea.
Thanks.
Yep. Before I saw a hand of blessing. Not anymore. Somebody else?
Hi, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yeah, I wanted to say something in relation to what Elder Emma said about the kingdom of God or the movement. So mine is not a question, but I guess it's a thought that came up because of her question. So on the top line that you drew, the very top, when you speak about the different things that this movement has had to learn, or the themes of the different waymarks, I think I would agree with you that, in February to June, when Elder Tess did the Vesper series, she was trying to answer the question of sifting the left. And I could be wrong in this, but I think and a broader theme that was being addressed by her studies is the failure of the counter-revolution by the left. So the failure of the left. A story which had begun in a previous dispensation in 2020, because we already had lines for a rising counter-revolution from, I'll just say 2020, even though you could, trace its beginnings to before that. But with the death of George Floyd, you see a mobilization on the liberal side of America that also involves, similar ideas around the world, trying to agitate the subjects of equality and inclusion, and the repressive nature of, a lot of the systems and cultures that exist in our world today, but focus being the United States. So we get to 21 and we say this is the climax of the counter-revolution, just based on the story, the line, because the line we used, I think, was the American Revolution. So you had 1774 being 2019, 75 being Boston and Concord, which is where the revolution officially began, and then 76 being the Declaration of Independence. And I think it was not clear to see, even though we had a model that marks it in 21, that the counter-revolution climax is there, but it fails. So I'm suggesting that we have a model that teaches that it fails there, and we know it fails because the Sunday law is being agitated. It's basically inevitable. It's going to happen. So we have modeling that would indicate that counter-revolution failed. But it's in the increase of knowledge of this post-Panium dispensation where we begin to see the failure. And I think that history of February to June has different things that bring the failure of the counter-revolution to visibility. So one of them being, as you mentioned, American society's response to Amber Heard. It was different to America's response to George Floyd, showing the overall attitude to gender issues. It was not the same outrage, and mobilization for gender equality as was seen in 2020 for racial equality. And then you get to June 24, I think, being the epitome or the climax of that failure. Because what you have now is the Supreme Court overturning 50 years of precedent and essentially withdrawing women's rights to bodily autonomy, officially. So I think that was I'm calling it the climax of the visibility of the failure of that counter-revolution. So that's why I'm saying I think the theme of that history of February to June from a movement perspective is the failure of the counter-revolution, coming to terms with that. And when you get to the formalization, which I think you are placing in April-May time period, I was just going to pick May out because what you have by the time you get to May is Elder Terry gives a message, which I think someone has already said this before me, that probably the most important thing she points out in her studies is the significance of voting, which I will rephrase and say the importance of participation or collective participation, because she laid out the history of voting in the United States, voting rights in the United States, and how voting or the lack thereof has significantly impacted the direction that the United States goes. So when you get to May, and she's identifying this issue of voting, I think the theme or the subject there is the importance of collective action or collective participation. We would call it voting. Because one of the things she did say is, Donald Trump is going to win, largely because a lot of people who should vote will not vote. And I'm saying when you get to May, it's not a message to say people should vote in November. I don't think that's what is being identified. But I think consistent with the failure of the counter-revolution is that people should have engaged in collective action together. before then. Because when you get to June 24 of 22, sorry, I know it's a bit long, I'm almost there. But June 24th of 2022, what that caused is some kind of mobilization. So you had a voting bloc in the United States that mobilized on the issue of abortion rights, with the midterms clearly in view. So they were trying to, make abortion rights an issue that would bring together a broad coalition to push back at this rising tide of intolerance and inequality that was taking hold in the United States. And I'm saying, without proving it, that it didn't really work. Right. So people went out, people voted. Of course, the Republicans didn't do well in the midterm election, but I think it came a little too late. This is what I'm saying. So when you get to May, I don't think it's saying people should vote in the upcoming election. It's just pointing out that this is coming out a little too late. But for the movement, I think it's pointing internally the importance of participation, because I think Elder Terry did say in her study that the issue of suffrage and voting externally, that participation for success, but we know that externally it's not a success because the Sunday law is here effectively. It's unavoidable by the time you get to 21. But I think it's pointing out that if we are going to be successful, we can only be successful if we all collectively participate. So I think that's, if I could say, our test, the testing message that was being identified at that point. And whether we recognize that and, are fully engaging, is up to us to judge. But I think one thing that it brings to view is that we got to July, so that's July of 24, and we didn't have unity, no consensus. And I'm not saying it's necessarily negative, but I'm just saying there's a lot of things that were not clear. We couldn't even see 18 July as significant. And I think the reason for that, if you ask me, is that in prior dispensations, there wasn't sufficient enough collective participation or collective action in trying to understand these things. And May was meant to bring that to our attention, to correct it going forward. That, going forward, we really need to, as a movement, all of us put our heads together and work together in trying to refine our message, to come up with robust arguments and understand what has happened, what is happening, and to whatever extent we can, what is going to come. So that then connects with what you said about 22 January to June. I think that seems to be in line with what was pointed out, the need for collective action, where different presenters have been sharing their thoughts on the Sunday law, and we have all been required to participate in that process, both in listening to the presentation and also in questioning, sharing thoughts and ideas, etc. So that's the thought that came to my mind when Elder Emma, asked the question about, so what internal significance is this to us? What can we see about the kingdom of heaven or this movement? That's what I wanted to share about your top line there.
Thank you. I like that. Thank you. Anybody else having any thoughts? Curtis?
This one is more of a comment than anything. it's just that. So I guess in the movement, there's different variations, or at least there were at some point, and now less so of variations. But well, I'll just say there's broadly variations of when the Sunday law begins. And a question that I've had asked to me and I've had on my mind is like, what's the important thing? Is it what the day of the event, like the date that you have, that it's July or January or November, or like, is that the thing that God wants us to know? Or is it like what's happening at that waymark? Um, and I guess I've gravitated towards the latter. It's not so much the significance of the date itself, it's what's happening, and what you identify as what's happening is what's going to ground that top bit, that top line that you have. Because if you say, okay, it's the Republican Party and their failure, then that means something fundamentally different to saying Trump being inaugurated as president, or um, Trump winning the November election, and etc. It has different implications with regards to what the image of the beast is. And so it impacts what you're going to learn from the top line, the top bit, the internal development of truth, and etc. So I think in us trying to understand Emma's question and trying to answer Emma's question, a lot of questions from people to presenters is like, what's your justification for that month and that thing? In my opinion, I think that's the wrong question to ask. It's more so, what event, what thing um, is it that's happening that can point to the characteristics of, we'll say, the image of the beast, because that gives you the license to then compare and contrast. It's not the day is going to give you the license to compare and contrast with, I don't know, a speaker spoke on a specific day. Sometimes it lines up very nicely and that's great, but it's not necessarily the thing that I don't think God wants us to take away from all of this, that there's days that things happen. It's what's happening on that. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, and I agree. It's not about the dates, but it's about the events taking place and the story you want to tell. And in the end, you will have to deal with dates.
Yeah. I'm not taking that away. Yeah.
No, I see that, but it's the primary focus is, of course, what do we recognize being the image of the beast? What model are you using? And like I tried to explain here, is I came to my 2025 conclusion based on a model that I needed to change, and Elder Terry addressed the change of that model. And then the implications, when you suddenly start to think in this way, and you start to see the dragon since 1798 in the USA, then suddenly you start to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, I can see the Republican Party as the dragon, as the image of the beast, and there's no need for the things that I thought was necessary for the waymark. So it's I was focusing on 2025 or January 2025 as being Sunday law in the past, because I had a certain idea of a certain model I was working with. So it's not about the data, it's about the story you want to tell, and the story needs to fit the prophetic models we have. And if we adjust the models, or when we, or no, not adjust, but when we get a better understanding of the models, I guess we get a better understanding of what events we should look for. And then in the end, we will have dates also. And sometimes there is something in the date that is nice or significant, but no, not always. Yeah, Curtis.
On that, you explained it, but could you distill in a sentence, if you can? So you had, your original premise was that Sunday law equals 2025. Why? Could you say why? And then your understanding of July as Sunday law now, why? So why couldn't it be
Why?
26
Because
in
the
2021?
king of the north enters the glorious land. I think there's maybe more reasons, but I'll use that one. The king of the north enters the glorious land. So something needs to happen in America as America, so to speak. The king of the north takes control, enters into, takes control of, in my mind. So that didn't happen in July. So that was my simplistic reasoning of saying, well, that happens in January, right?
So it was January because that's when the King of the North gets inaugurated. So it couldn't have been 26, 27, 28. It was specifically 25 because that's inauguration. Question mark.
Yes, there the king of the north gets the power.
Okay.
That marks the beginning of it. Yeah.
And then again, the change to July was because of a recognition that it's not necessary, it doesn't have to necessarily be the whole country.
Yes, and the fact that entering into the glorious land is actually this whole process.
Okay.
It's actually happening there and not here.
Got you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. We've been going on for. Okay, go on.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to. I don't know if it's ask and say at the same time. I guess the question is, when dealing with the waymarks like 2021 and 2024, 21 being Panium and 24 being the Sunday law, we mark Panium as a waymark on the line of 144,000 when we refer to it as Panium, at least, right? So when we develop the story of Panium, there's a lot of extra details that don't seem to be relevant. Is that correct? Like Panium is a fight between the King of the North and the King of the South. So other things that happen in 21 are not relevant to that story.
Are there things happening in 2021 that are not relevant to that story?
Yes, because I'm saying we're talking about Panium, or the fight between the King of the North and the King of the South. So everything else is noise.
Yes, if you look at Panium itself, it's about Eastern Front. So Panium is not something that happens internal in the movement, or Panium is not something that happens inside in the Western Front. Panium is Eastern Front.
Mm-hmm.
If you
So
just
the reason why I'm asking that is because when we look at 2021 as I think you mentioned, and I'm not holding you to it. I know you said the main theme was radical feminism, but when we then mention things like there is a formalization in 2021 that applies to, we'll say, the priest, and we've got August 15 as a waymark there, and the withdrawal from Afghanistan by the United States, or the takeover of the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's not part of your story, is it?
no, yeah, not part, because it's outside of it. It's. I think that was no, it's not part of this story. No, sure.
Okay. So should we not approach 2024 the same way? That is to say, when we're dealing with 2024 as a waymark on the line of the 144,000, whatever we want to call it, but that big line, we look at that story within that context, and then when we now want to zero in on, say, some internal details for the dispensation, that miniature dispensation between 21 and the Sunday law, which we call the harvest of the Levites or the latter rain of the Nethinim, then we have a different set of waymarks lined out, if you get what I'm saying. Because I think based on own story. You said Panium is February to October, right? And if we were to look at the harvest of the priests, we would mark different dates and different stories. So like August 15, where we say Taliban take over of Afghanistan and LGBTQ internally. So I'm saying, shouldn't we approach 2024 the same way, where we say, when we're looking at it as the Sunday law, on the line of 144,000, so the line of the institutions, whatever, the big line, we are marking a certain events or certain dates. And then when we are looking at the harvest of the Levites or the latter rain of the Nethinims, we are marking slightly different story and therefore different waymarks and dates. And then we start putting, things like formalization and stuff in that story. Because I kind of feel like so far there hasn't been a distinction made between the two on the Sunday law 2024, the way that we have done with Panium 21. So my question is, shouldn't we be doing the same thing with 24?
Interesting. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure if I understand everything you said. But going back to 2021 and Afghanistan, I think one of the things of August 15 is actually part of the story you told about the top line, where you can, although it is an external event, it really, pulling out of Afghanistan is really the main failure for Biden's presidency. So this counter-revolution. So Biden was basically kind of like this counter-revolution thing. He was elected in the 2020 time period. There was this counter-revolution taking place, but at the same time, we see that it fails. What you just described here for the top line, to explain that top line a little bit. I think August 15 is part of that story also. That if you look back into the 2021 October history, the dilemma that Biden had, I only described two things, which has to do with the credibility of the USA and the rise of Russia. That Russia was actually a trustworthy partner because of the propaganda they promoted in the 2 decades before. The third thing that Biden needed to deal with was his own failure the pulling out of Afghanistan wasn't so wasn't well received in America. So going into something new, and he said he promised not to go into a new war, and then it was a load that he carried with him, and had influenced him for the rest of his. I think he never really recovered from that event. So to answer your question, is it part of the story? I think it's part of that story.
So, okay, maybe just to clarify, what I was saying is it's two different stories. So like you pointed out, so the one story, Panium, is, to simplify it, I'll say Russia's change of behavior. Russia becomes more belligerent in 2021, right, with its massive military buildup. That's Panium.
Yeah, okay.
But when we talk about things like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think you pointed out that it's related to the failure of the left, right? It's related to that.
Yeah.
And that is the story of the harvest of the priests. So the harvest of the priests from 2019 to 21 was, around this counter-revolution story, and the fact that the counter-revolution is a failure. So Afghanistan is related to the failure of the left wing. But we don't include that when we talk about Russia's change of behavior, because Panium, Afghanistan has nothing to do with Russia's change of behavior. It's a different story. So I'm saying when we come to 2024, should we not do the same thing? Where we say when we are marking the Sunday law as a waymark on the big line, it has its specific story. And we are not trying to fit in an Exeter there or anything, because Sunday law is a standalone waymark. It's not really associated with a formalization or an Exeter, right?
Okay, so I guess
because Panium is the Exeter, right?
Yeah.
So I was saying, but when we then look at the harvest of the Levites or the lattering of the Nethinims, that's when we start trying to identify things like increase of knowledge and formalization. So far, not just you, I'm just saying so far, in my observation of the discussions about 2024, the Sunday law, is that there's been a blending of the two in a way that doesn't really distinguish them. Whereas in 21, we clearly distinguish them. So I'm saying, shouldn't we be doing that as well with 24?
Yeah.
That's my question.
I get it now. Yeah, perhaps. And I think this is related to Curtis' question about should all the lines have all the waymarks, or should we see all the characteristics at all the waymarks? Yeah, good food for thought. Thank you. I'll think about that. Andres?
Hi, Arjan.
Hi.
So my question is about something you just mentioned, in regards to the National Assembly law and the King of the North taking the Glorious Land. And I think you said that part of what part of the reasoning for change or going from having the Sunday law in 2025 to 2024 was recognizing that the King of the North entering the Glorious Land is a period from the National Sunday Law to the Worldwide Sunday Law. If that's what you said, could you elaborate on that, and how do you come to that conclusion?
Yes. Well, I think that's the consequence of this model, National Sunday Law time, because I always thought Sunday law marks the point where America is the King of the North has dealt with America here. Now it's going to the rest of the world. And I needed to change that model because it only starts going into, because it was all agitation. This is all agitation. It's not the Sunday law time period. The Sunday law time period is here. So here, the Sunday law just started. And so the image of the beast was set up. It was there. Now it's going to do something in this time period. So this was all only setting up of the image. Now it's going to enter into the glorious land. Now it's going to do something. What I wanted to say. So and the other thing is, I think this is also what Elder Terry herself has presented. She says we have this idea of verse 41. It's one event. The King of the North enters into the glorious land. It's a law. It's a Sunday law, kind of like that was before, of course. but she says first Article 11 verse 40, verse 40b, also takes several years. Like in 1989 to 1991 was 3 years of bringing down the king of the south, for example. So why not entering into the glorious land? Why do we expect that to be one thing, one event, and not a period of time? So those things have contributed to my change of understanding this history, that I think enters into the glorious land in our mind, or in my mind, was an event. Something happened, and now from now on, this is it, and not thinking it of as a process. But the fall of the king of the south was also a process. So we can see here the fall of the or the rise of the seventh kingdom internally here in the United States, and that is the agitation of the world, Sunday law. And then we can see the rise into the world, the seventh kingdom into the world. So it shifted all kind of, like, in my mind, it has been shifted one dispensation.
Yeah. So I think it's really helpful how you explained it. I'm just processing in my mind now, how does that connect, how does that connect to shifting, the beginning of that period from 2025 to 2024? Because in your previous model, you didn't consider that, like that it was going to be a period, but you had the Sunday law in 2025, or starting, I guess.
Yeah, I had the Sunday law. No, I suggested it was January. It could have been, I think Curtis asked me 2026 or 2027. I think I always was open to anything, but I suggested it would have been January 2025, because Trump was really announcing that he would start peace talks with Russia and with Ukraine and solve that problem. That was my mind of this.
Okay.
The Eastern
Yeah.
Front.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was focused on Eastern Front. So I assumed that was kind of like a prediction from Trump. Trump predicted, I'm going to fix that from January onward. So that's why I was focused on January, but theoretically it could have been anything in my mind. So how did this contribute to my shift from 2025 to 2024? I guess it is because, first, I thought the USA was one, and I now understand that the dragon, or the USA, is divided. The dragon has been there all the time. It has been part of the USA. You can even trace it all the way through the time since 1798. You can trace it all the way to today. So you can see the dragon, and you can just see, when does the dragon get its power? When is it restored into its full glory? There was July 18. There it was restored. It was in its full glory, and and then in December it actually gets power as a in the nation itself. But I think that is even not necessary to have for this Weimar. July 18 is enough, I think, to really have a restored republic, or a restored Republican Party, or even a rebirth of the Republican Party. That is enough to have the Sunday law, that it's not a national thing. It enters into the glorious land, takes control of the glorious land. It's not necessary, because that is only going to take place in the dispensation after. And in my mind, that needed all to be done here in this dispensation before. So that's why it at least needed to be 2025 or later, in my mind, before.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so the event that you were expecting to happen at the Sunday law in connection to the Eastern Front, do you now expect it to happen at the worldwide Sunday law?
Yeah, I think the worldwide Sunday law in regard to the Eastern Front is where Russia has no, like what I did here. So Russia has no influence.
It would be the same thing that previously you thought was going to be the Sunday law.
Yes. And at the same
Okay.
time, I realize it's probably going to be different anyway. So, but yes, at the moment,
Yeah, don't
I would
worry.
say yes.
Okay. Okay. I gotcha.
All right. Good.
Just a quick question on something that Andres brought up. And I hate to put you on the spot. So if you don't want to answer this, then that's fine. But so let's just say you shifted from that model you have on the left to the model you have on the right. Is the implication that you don't agree with Elder Tess when she says the many are overthrown prior to the Sunday law? And that in reality, the many are overthrown post the National Sunday Law waymark?
What was the beginning part of your question? There was already a question mark, right?
Is the implication of what you've described in this shift between the models that you disagree with Elder Tess when she says that the many are
Yes.
overthrown?
Okay. Yes. Yes. Because she says, I think she says the many are overthrown here, and we're now saying it's happening here.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes. And then I was trying to remember what the other thing that Andres said that came to mind. You said that December is not necessary for July. I mean, I see July as the, in inverted commas, the event. You know, it tells a specific story in its context. Let's say we didn't have this bookmarking thing that we do. Tess didn't do the bookmarking thing, etc. And Trump loses the election. Are we still in the Sunday law period?
Yeah, I thought about that as well. Yeah, I don't know if that's the theoretical questions or hypothetical questions. How do you say that?
Or he wins it in 4 years' time. Would that mean that we're in the Sunday law period, even though he's going to win it in 2028? So I guess it's just questioning whether that's relevant or not.
Yeah. It's yeah, I think on that level it is relevant, and therefore I think yeah, I placed December there, and I think it is a relevant date, but it depends on the story you're telling. You know, if you tell the story of the Republican Party and the setting up of the image of the beast, if you the dragon, I think July 18 is enough. And I think if you want to tell the story of the Republican Party getting control of the nation, and I think you can see December marks the beginning, although you can't really see it at the moment because it doesn't do anything, but it's kind of like the boss. So I think later maybe I can describe it this way. This is the July 18 describes the end of a dispensation, and December describes the beginning of the other dispensation. So that's the Boston. So if you want to tell the Boston story, you have December, in the beginning of the new phase, and July marks the end of the previous dispensation. I would say, depending on the story you tell. So no, December is a relevant date. I agree with that date. But in some stories you don't need it to have it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to repeat my question for Charity. She's written in the chat she didn't understand what I was asking.
Okay.
I'll try and rephrase it. I had asked Arjan what his perspective is on the bookmarking, the book ending of waymarks, specifically in relation to July and December, because I think he had said the important thing to see is July 18 and the Republican Party. And so I asked him if we didn't have December, i.e., Trump getting power, and not just Trump, the Republican Party getting power, could we still say that we're in the Sunday law period? So that was my question to him. Does the question make sense, Charity? Okay, good. And I may be wrong. I may be misquoting or misinterpreting the teacher or speaker, whoever it was, about this December thing. But from what I understood, from what they were talking about, it was about the Republican Party again, because it's Republican electors that go and vote for Trump in December in the Electoral College. So in the same breath, where in July it's Republican inverted commas elector, in December it's also Republican electors as a representative of institutions. So one thing that I picked up from the first study that you did in Germany was when you were going through the book endings, there was a point that stuck with me, which was that when you bookend it, it needs to be related to the same story. So it's not just two random things that you bring together, which is what piqued my interest when you did June and November in the second one, because I can't see the relationship there specifically. But now going back to the July and December, is the story that I understood the person who taught that was drawing out was the Republican Party and their relationship to all of that, as gatekeepers, so to speak.
So you say Republican Party,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because when we speak about, I'm just going to use old terminology, church and state. The state is the state is your three branches, really. Like the Republican Party is now the king that's going to get power to control the state. If it doesn't have that, then the Republican Party is just this group of people that want stuff in the nation. They don't have any political force.
Yeah.
And Andre said never mind.
Oh,
Okay, it's unfortunate that I'm the person who has to say this now, but we've gone for a lot of time.
Call it a person X.
We won't read Andres's comment, but we've gone on for a while now, and I think we can draw to a close. And why I said it's unfortunate that I had to say that because I was the last one that spoke. So, but I'll leave you, Arjan, to wrap up your thoughts and close for us in prayer.
yes, thank you. That was nice. And I agree with you to come back to what you said. The June 15th November, I've been thinking about that one as well. First, I had actually August there. That, yeah, work in progress, so to speak. August was the first death of and to the death decree. All right, I'll check that. Thank you. Let's close in prayer. I think there's no summary needed. I think we've discussed. There was nice questions, with nice discussions, and I learned a lot as well today. So that was good. I hope it was a blessing for all of us. Let's pray together.
Thank you. It was a long time you gave us. Thank you.
Lord, it's been a blessing to studying together this morning. I pray that you continue to be the preacher, the after preacher to our mind and hearts, that we are able to contemplate the things that we've discussed today in our own time or together when we see each other and speak to each other. I pray, Lord, that you help us to get a better understanding of the concepts, the time we're living in, and of your kingdom. Lord, I pray that this message may swell into a loud cry, or we know it's going to swell into a loud cry, but that we also, I pray, Lord, that we also will be able to recognize it, be part of it, and that it will change our lives, change our hearts. I pray that it can do the necessary work internally for us as well. I pray for a continued blessing upon this Sabbath, Lord, as we separate and bring us back together one day when possible. In Jesus' name, I pray and I thank you for studying with the UK group. Amen.